Welcome back, everyone, to e-commerce psychology. Today, we are diving deep on a sense that's often overlooked in the online world.
Mm,
Touch.
yeah.
It's easy to forget how important it is in brick-and-mortar stores.
Yeah, for sure.
But what about when you're selling strictly online?
Well, what's fascinating is how deeply touch is wired into our brains. You know,
Right.
it's not just about feeling texture, it's about influencing emotions,
Yeah.
building trust,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately impacting those buy or don't buy decisions.
That's right. And that's why we are diving into this study, The Neurological Impact of Touch in Product Imagery and Description
Mhm.
by Mohammed Tufekcipan.
Okay.
It really gets into how our brains process touch and how e-commerce businesses can make up for the lack of physical interaction.
Yeah, and as a quick reminder, this deep dive into the science of touch is powered by Growth Suite.
Yes.
Want to run smart discount campaigns on your Shopify store?
Hmm.
Test Growth Suite for free on the Shopify App Store link in the show notes.
Now, you might think of your senses as separate things. Sight, sound, touch.
Sure.
But they actually work together.
Yeah.
The article points out that our brains combine them to create a complete picture, and this definitely influences how we perceive a product.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
If you see a picture of a fluffy blanket, your brain might already be anticipating a certain softness,
Yeah.
even before you touch it.
Oh.
That expectation combined with what you actually feel shapes your whole experience.
So that's how they're connected.
Right.
Now, the article dives into this brain region called the somatosensory cortex.
Yeah.
What's its role in all of this?
The somatosensory cortex is like Grand Central Station for touch information.
Okay.
It's constantly receiving signals from those tiny sensors in your skin called mechanoreceptors.
Mhm.
They're detecting pressure, texture, vibrations, everything you feel.
It's wild to think these little sensors are sending messages to the brain, saying things like, hey, this is rough, or wow, this is silky smooth.
That's a pretty accurate way to put it.
Yeah.
But here's what's really interesting. These messages aren't processed in isolation.
Okay.
The brain combines them with information from your other senses like sight to form a complete picture of what you're experiencing.
So it's like our brains are creating a multisensory movie in our heads.
Right.
Combining what we see here, and touch makes sense, since touch is obviously a huge deal in a physical store.
Sure.
The article talks about how touching a product can actually reduce uncertainty and boost sales.
Exactly. Think about the last time you picked up a sweater and felt the softness.
Uh-huh.
Didn't that make you more likely to buy it?
Yeah.
There's a sense of reassurance that comes with touch, a feeling of knowing what you're getting.
Totally. But the article calls out this digital dilemma where online shoppers can't physically interact with products.
Right.
I bet this touch deprivation you mentioned could create hesitation,
Yeah.
especially for things like clothes where the feel is crucial.
Absolutely. And that's a major challenge for e-commerce businesses.
Right.
How do you recreate that feeling of confidence and connection when someone can't physically hold the product?
Right. So how do we bridge that gap?
Mm-hmm.
The author mentions tech solutions like virtual and augmented reality. Are those actually effective?
Well, VR and AR have come a long way, especially with haptic feedback, which tries to simulate touch sensations.
Okay.
But while visually impressive, the neural responses in our brains are still different compared to actually touching something.
Interesting. So even if we're visually immersed in a virtual world,
Hmm.
our brains can still tell the difference. You mentioned this earlier, but I'm curious to hear more about these limitations in the tech.
Right.
Can you give us some specific examples of how VR falls short of real touch?
Let's say you're using VR to explore a virtual furniture store.
Yep.
You can see a beautiful sofa, even touch it with haptic gloves. But the current tech can't fully replicate the feeling of sinking into plush cushions or running your hand along the grain of the leather. Those subtle nuances of texture, temperature, and pressure are still difficult to recreate digitally.
I see. So while VR might give a visual sense of a product, it can't quite replace that gut feeling you get from actually touching something that brings us to the emotional side of touch. The article highlights the limbic system, the part of the brain that deals with emotions, pleasure, and reward.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this means pleasant touch sensations can trigger a reward response.
You gotta think about the simple act of stroking a pet's fur or sinking into a comfy chair.
Okay.
These pleasurable touch experiences can lead to the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with feeling good and wanting more.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, a positive touch experience could make someone more likely to buy something. It's like dopamine is giving them that little push towards making a purchase.
It's definitely possible, and this is where things get interesting for e-commerce businesses. How do you create those positive dopamine-inducing touch experiences in a digital world?
All right, I'm hooked. Spill the beans. How
Yeah.
do we translate those good feelings into online sales when no one can actually touch anything?
Well, well, one approach is to tap into the power of words.
You mean like using descriptive language to evoke a sense of touch?
Exactly.
Give me some examples. I'm all ears.
Think about phrases like silky smooth, cool to the touch, or rough-hewn texture. Those kinds of descriptions can actually trigger a mental simulation of touch in the brain, almost like you're experiencing it for real.
Whoa, that's pretty mind-blowing. So just
hmm
by reading those words, our brains can almost feel this sensation.
hmm
How does that even work?
It's all thanks to these amazing things called mirror neurons. They fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else doing the same thing.
Okay.
So when you read a description of touch, those mirror neurons light up, creating a kind of virtual touch experience in your mind.
Okay, that makes sense. But wouldn't it depend on the words used? I mean, soft is a
Yeah.
lot less descriptive than saying something like feels like a cloud.
You're absolutely right. The article emphasizes using concrete, sensory-rich words to paint a vivid picture instead of saying comfortable fabric. You could say feels like a second skin, light and breathable. The more specific and evocative the language, the stronger the mental touch simulation and the more connected the consumer will feel to the product.
That's such a brilliant insight. It's making me rethink my entire approach to product descriptions.
Yeah.
It's not just about listing features and benefits anymore. It's about creating an experience, even if it's just in the customer's mind.
Right.
So I'm getting the words are powerful. But what about visuals? What role do they play in all this?
Visuals are absolutely essential. High-resolution images that show texture details, close-ups of fabric weaves, even videos that demonstrate how a product feels in someone's hand. All of these can help bridge the gap. You want to give those online shoppers as much sensory information as possible to compensate for the lack of physical touch.
Okay, so we're talking high-quality visuals
Yeah.
that really showcase the tactile aspects of the product.
Exactly.
This episode is brought to you by Growth Suite.
Okay.
Growth Suite helps you to run smart discount campaigns on your store. Test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free.
Think about it this way. If you're selling a soft, cozy sweater, you wouldn't just use one generic photo. You'd want multiple images that show the knit, the drape, maybe even a close-up of someone's hand running over the fabric.
So it's about creating a multi-sensory experience through visuals, even without the customer actually touching the product. But I have to ask, does everyone value touch equally? I mean, some people love to feel fabrics in stores while others are perfectly fine just looking at pictures online.
You've hit on a crucial point. Not everyone craves touch to the same degree. There's this fascinating scale called the Need for Touch Scale, or NFT for short,
Yeah.
which measures how much individuals crave or depend on tactile interaction.
That's interesting. So someone with a high NFT score would be the type who just has to touch everything before they buy it.
Exactly. These are the people who get immense satisfaction from physically interacting with objects. And studies show their brains actually light up more in sensory regions when they handle products for these individuals. The lack of touch in e-commerce can be a real barrier.
That makes a lot of sense. So for e-commerce businesses targeting those high NFT folks, visuals and descriptions become even more important, right? It's like you have to work harder to create that sense of touch when it's missing.
You nailed it. And it's not just about marketing, it's also about product design. If you know that touch is so crucial, why not bake it into the design process right from the start?
That's an intriguing idea. So how would understanding the neuroscience of touch inform product design? Give me an example.
Let's say you're designing a high-end smartphone. Knowing that touch is linked to perceived quality, you might choose a cool, smooth metal that feels substantial and luxurious in the hand. Or if you're designing a children's toy, you might opt for soft, rounded edges and bright textured surfaces that are stimulating and fun to touch.
So even subtle choices in material and texture can make a big difference in how a product is perceived. And ultimately, whether it's successful or not, I'm starting to see touch everywhere now.
That's the power of awareness. Once you start paying attention, you realize just how much touch influences our daily lives, from the texture of our clothes to the feel of our phone screens. And for e-commerce businesses, this awareness can be the key to creating truly compelling and engaging experiences.
That's been a real eye-opener. But I'm curious, what's next for touch in e-commerce? Are we on the verge of being able to actually feel products online?
It's a question that researchers and tech innovators are grappling with right now. The article mentions some really exciting developments in haptic technology. We're talking about systems that can simulate a wider range of textures, temperatures, and even pressures. Imagine putting on a pair of gloves and being able to feel the softness of a cashmere sweater you're browsing online. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like we're on the cusp of a whole new era of online shopping, where the digital and physical worlds blur even further.
Absolutely. But it's not just about replicating physical sensations. It's also about understanding the emotional and cognitive aspects of touch and how those can be incorporated into the online experience we're talking about, using AI to personalize recommendations based on your individual touch preferences, or creating virtual showrooms where you can walk around and interact with products in a truly immersive way.
I'm starting to see the potential here. It's not just about selling products anymore. It's about creating a complete sensory experience that engages the customer on multiple levels. But with all this talk about technology and innovation, I'm also thinking about the ethical implications.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
That's a crucial point. As we get better at understanding and manipulating touch, we need to be mindful of the ethical implications. For example, if we can personalize online shopping experiences based on touch preferences, how do we ensure that data is being used responsibly and not in a way that exploits vulnerabilities or undermines consumer autonomy? Transparency and respect for privacy are paramount.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like with any powerful tool, it can be used for good or for bad. And as we move forward, it's essential to have open conversations about these ethical considerations and ensure that touch is used in a way that benefits both businesses and consumers. But before we wrap up this fascinating deep dive, there's one more crucial area we need to address: cultural differences. How does culture influence our perception and experience of touch?
That's a fantastic question. Touch isn't just a biological phenomenon, it's also deeply ingrained in our social and cultural norms. What feels appropriate or comfortable in one culture might be totally different in another.
So what you're saying is that a touch-based marketing strategy that works well in one country might totally backfire in another?
Precisely, touch norms vary widely around the world. For example, in some cultures, it's perfectly normal to greet people with a hug or a kiss on the cheek,
Yeah,
while in others, a handshake or a slight bow is more appropriate.
right.
These cultural differences can extend to how people interact with products, too.
Okay.
In some cultures, shoppers might be more comfortable touching and handling products before they buy them,
Mm-hmm.
while in others, they might prefer to observe from a distance.
That's something I never really considered before. So for e-commerce businesses selling to a global audience, it's crucial to be aware of these cultural nuances.
Yes,
And tailor your approach accordingly.
exactly. You might need to offer different types of product imagery or descriptions depending on the cultural context.
Okay.
Or you might need to provide different options for virtual or augmented reality experiences, taking into account varying levels of comfort with touch. It's all about being sensitive to the cultural context and respecting the diversity of touch preferences around the world.
This is all getting very meta. We're talking about the psychology of touch while using our sense of touch to interact with our devices and listen to this deep dive.
It is a bit of a mind bender, isn't it? But that's what makes this topic so fascinating. It's deeply ingrained in our biology, our psychology, and even our culture.
And it's something we often take for granted until it's missing, like in the case of e-commerce. But it sounds like there's a lot of exciting research and development happening in this field.
Absolutely. Researchers are exploring all sorts of new possibilities, from portable neuroimaging devices that can measure brain activity in real-world settings to advanced haptic technologies that can create even more realistic touch sensations.
So we might be able to personalize online shopping experiences based on individual touch preferences, or even create virtual environments where we can feel the texture of a fabric or the weight of a product as if it were right there in our hands.
It's all within the realm of possibility, and it's not just about improving the e-commerce experience. This research has implications for fields like education, healthcare, and even social interaction.
It's amazing to think how much we can learn about ourselves and each other through this sense of touch.
And the more we learn, the more we realize how much we still don't know.
Well, that's the beauty of science, isn't it? There's always more to discover. But as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of touch, what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
First and foremost, I hope they'll remember that touch is a powerful and often underestimated sense. It shapes our perceptions, influences our emotions, and plays a vital role in how we experience the world around us.
And for those of us in the e-commerce world, it's a crucial factor to consider when designing products, creating marketing campaigns and building online experiences.
Exactly. We need to be mindful of the limitations of the digital realm and find creative ways to engage our customers' sense of touch, even if they can't physically interact with our products.
We've talked about a lot of strategies today, from using vivid, sensory-rich language to incorporating high-resolution images and videos to exploring emerging technologies like virtual and augmented reality.
And remember, it's not just about replicating the physical sensations of touch, it's about understanding the deeper psychological and emotional connections that touch can create.
It's about creating experiences that are engaging, memorable, and ultimately satisfying for our customers.
Well said. And it's about doing all of this ethically and responsibly with transparency and respect for our customers' privacy and autonomy.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of touch.
It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners, we encourage you to pay attention to the tactile elements of your own e-commerce experience.
Notice the textures, the weights, the temperatures, and think about how those sensations influence your perceptions and decisions.
And if you're running an e-commerce business, challenge yourself to find ways to incorporate touch-based strategies into your own online experience.
Use descriptive language, high-quality visuals, and interactive elements to create a more engaging and memorable experience for your customers.
You might be surprised at the difference it makes. And that wraps up our deep dive into the fascinating world of touch. This episode was powered by Growth Suite.
Right.
Growth Suite helps you to run smart discount campaigns on your store. Test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.